Not one without struggles, of course, but a wonderful journey, kind of making this into my life's work. So I need to just share a brief history of Maria Montessori so that my experience is a little more meaningful for those people who maybe aren't quite familiar with her and her work. So Maria Montessori is a person who was born in 1870 in Italy, and she actually became the first Italian female doctor, yes. And she actually had to have special permission from the Pope to attend medical school because women were not allowed to do such things at the time. They made it very, very difficult for her to get through. She had to work with the cadavers by herself in the lab at night. She wasn't allowed to be in the labs with the male students. Like many, many obstacles she overcame. She did graduate with a medical degree, and then she was quickly placed into what was then called an insane asylum to work with defective children. That was the only place they would let her work. So she started her work in a hospital with a big room full of children who were basically had some kind of disabilities or perhaps were just orphans, all kinds of both physical and mental challenges. And they were all just put into a room with nothing else, and that's basically where they lived. So you can imagine what that might have been like. So she observed quickly that, of course, they needed something to do. So she proceeded to make materials for them, create things to help them take care of themselves, to help them have interest in the world around them, to help them learn language and just the basics of life, basically. And she made all these things on her own at home and then would bring them in for the children. And she noticed just this remarkable transformation that children actually had all this capability, even though everyone thought they were just write-offs, right? So she saw this amazing progress happening where children were concentrating and learning to communicate and happier. And she then took her work to the streets of Rome, and she worked with street children in the suburb, the slums of Rome, basically. Once again, it was like one of the only places she could find to try to test and develop her interest in children's development. So at that time, there were many, many children who just lived on the streets. Their parents could perhaps go to work, and there was no such thing as daycare or anything like that. And so there were just children running, free everywhere, and they caused a lot of problems. So she found an owner of a big tenement building who gave her a room that she was able to convert into a classroom of sorts and take these children in off the streets and apply her ideas of how children learn and observe the children and use the same materials she had used with the children in the hospital, and really noticed that there are these just amazing things that could happen with children if they were in the right environment. So she started with basic stuff like how to comb your hair, how to blow your nose, how to talk to another person, how to wait for a turn, how to, just basic social interaction and self-care, and then expanded into all sorts of, more academic things, language and numbers and culture and all those sorts of things, and had incredible success and ended up starting schools all over. And by the time she finished her life's work in 1950, she passed away, she had schools all over the world. She had gone to India, she had gone to all places in Europe, she had come to North America and spread her philosophy. So there are a few main things about her philosophy that there are many, many wonderful concepts, but I'm going to kind of just stick to a couple that sort of transfer over to what we're talking about today. So first of all, she truly believed that education is the key to peace, that there was going to be no peace in the world unless children had an opportunity to learn. So she didn't think of it just as solving a little problem. She identified it as what will make the world actually a successful place for everyone to live. She believed that we had to look at the whole child, not just the academic aspects of the child, but that they are a living spiritual creature who have emotional, social, intellectual, physical needs. Like, you know, everything is connected. That was another one of her big ideas, right? That all aspects of humanity and the environment are connected. There's nothing that can happen separate from the other aspects of life. Sounds a lot like Soka education. So she also believed that we had to value every child as an individual. That yes, there were planes of development that people went through, but that they were individuals. They may not reach this milestone at the same time as someone else. And she also identified that people learn in different ways. There are many, many different learning styles, and when she was developing her materials, she very much had that in mind. They were kinesthetic, they were sensorial, they were visual, and they addressed all learning styles so that hopefully no matter who the child was, there would be something that connected with them when using the materials. One of her biggest concepts was that the environment had to be prepared. So when we look at the title of the work from President Ikeda, teachers are the most important element in the student's educational environment, it's very much also her philosophy. So she believed that the physical environment had to be prepared, that things needed to be in order and beautiful and appropriate for the developmental stage that the children are in. But the thing that she focused on the most was that the teacher needed to be spiritually prepared to be with the children each and every day. So that has been a guiding principle that, you know, we can connect with President Ikeda's and Mr. Makaguchi's work all the time, right? That is such a key element. We can have the beautiful classroom and we can have all the materials and we can have whatever. But if we, as the person who these children are spending, you know, whether it's 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, like it was for me most of my career, or whether it's an hour a month, we need to be the person there who is open to respecting who they are, believing in their potential, seeing their creativity, trusting the process that everyone will get to where they need to get if given the proper environment, right? So that's not always easy. So after going through a Montessori teacher's training, there's a lot of stuff that you're supposed to get through, just like any teacher training, right? And it's very easy to get kind of focused on, wow, these are all the things that the children need to learn, right? So there's a lot of responsibility being teachers, as we all know. What I came to use my Buddhist practice for was to, in the morning when I was chanting each day, to really sincerely chant that I would be able to allow that spirit to come through the children of respect and believing in their potential, that I wouldn't be on an agenda that rushed them through my checklist of what I needed to get done each day, but that I would be able to be open to who they were, what their process was, that they had a life outside of that classroom as well. They may have come in after a really bad morning or had something go on that I wouldn't have any idea about. They may have had, we don't know what happens to people before they walk into our classrooms, but we have to remember that it's not always just about us getting through what we need to get through. So my chanting each day really, really helped me stay focused on that. I would chant that I would be not only a good mom and a good wife and a good friend to those people in my life, but that I would be that person who those children could connect with each day. So I can't tell you how much appreciation I have for having a practical tool to make that happen each day, because I think most people don't have something as practical as chanting to really connect with those parts of themselves. So, you chant for your wisdom to handle things to the best of your ability. You chant for joy, that you will experience joy with those children each day and celebrate the moments that there are to celebrate, right? So those were things that were in my morning prayers always. Went on to create a classroom that sort of slowly evolved, because what I started to notice was that when I would take time to address a child's issues or interactions that were going on between different children, and actually work on creating an environment where everyone felt safe and everyone felt like they had a voice and everyone felt like they were part of the community, that no one was outside of that. That's when I really noticed the learning start to happen. So we set up all kinds of wonderful things in our classroom. We had a peace table, so when there were conflicts between people, they would go to the peace table and problem solve together. It was sort of like a neutral place where they talk things through. That actually transferred out to the playground too. Children got kind of tired of going, oh, let's go into the peace table and talk about that. So they actually made like a peace tree in the playground and would go under the tree and talk about their problems. So it was lovely. And then some of the older grade 8 students actually started calling it Switzerland. They're like, oh, they're going to Switzerland. So it was fun. We also had a wonderful ritual at the end of the day where we'd all come together and do what we call peace stones. So we had a basket of beautiful different types of stones, and any child who felt like they wanted to share that day would come up and pick a stone out of the basket and just hold it while they were talking and talk about what it was that they were grateful for that day, or what it was that they saw someone else do that they thought was really wonderful that day. So really getting the children to have an appreciation for all the wonderful little things that happen throughout a day, right? And sort of instilling that, just like our chanting is a practice that we notice works if we do it regularly, instilling rituals like that in the classroom so that the children really do come to have that as something they look forward to, something they feel like, wow, this is my time where I can really share what I'm thinking about that. And they shared so many different things. I mean, from everything like, oh, I really like how, Zoe asked me to sit with her at lunch today, to, I really noticed that someone wrote a beautiful story, or I really felt happy when this happened. It was all over the map what they would choose to share, but everyone was so interested in what everyone else had to say. It was a sort of a very focused time of the day at the end of each day. Also, another little ritual that we had, and this is a very Montessori sort of thing too, is that each child was greeted each morning with, at eye level, with a handshake and a good morning using their name and just saying, I'm so happy you're here today, I'm so happy to see you today. And just every day taking that moment. And if you happen to be busy with another child or in another part of the room, a child would come in the morning and they would seek me out and just wait to say good morning to me. Like it was an important part of their day to just be acknowledged that we were happy they were there. Like, yay, you're here. That's great. And then we did the same thing at night. We would say goodbye to each other and thank you for being here today. Have a good evening. So, these are social graces. They're ways of having an appreciation for the people around you and the people you spend your time with each day that I think are really, really important to help children understand that there are ways to incorporate those kinds of feelings into our lives. So, quickly, I have a little experience that I wanted to share as well. About part of what happens in Montessori education is when they get to elementary level. Maria Montessori was very adamant that we need to give children context. They need to have sort of a big picture understanding of how the world works before we start focusing on the little details of things. So she had 5 what she called great lessons that were gone through at the beginning of each school year. So every year through grade 1 all the way through grade 8, you go through the great lessons. And later on when the children are older, they're very much the ones presenting the great lessons or portions of it to the younger children. So it's a lot of inter-age teaching that goes on in that environment. But the Great Lessons, where the first one is called The Coming of the Universe. And it's basically the story about how did all of this happen? Like, what the heck? Like, how are we here? How are there planets? How are there stars? How is there this earth that we live on? And the whole point of going through these great lessons is not to impart information so much on the children, but to give them a wonder of the world, to have them really be excited about learning, about not being given lots of information and answers, but to have a lot of questions. So what you really want after a great lesson is for everyone to be wondering about a whole bunch of things, right? And then from that is where their studies go. So they would choose whatever it was that they were most interested in learning about after hearing these stories. So children would go in many different directions. So part of what happens after the Coming of the Universe Great Lesson is that we spend a lot of time reading creation stories from all cultures. So as a part of our daily practice at school, we would have a different creation story. So we would have, the Judeo-Christian, we would have Hindu, we would have Aboriginal stories, we would have every sort of creation story we could find. So the children weren't hearing just a scientific narrative, but they were hearing that culture is really who we are, right? Like people, no matter who they are, where they come from, have a need to sort of explain their world and try to understand it. And we do that through culture. So this was a fascinating part to see how they thought about these stories, because we'd always discuss them after, and people would, have lots of ideas about what that meant, or it would remind them of other things. So the second great lesson is called The Timeline of Life. So it's a great big long timeline. It's about 20 feet long, and we roll it out on the floor and everyone sits around it, and it's basically pictures on a timeline that tell the story of how life started on Earth. So it starts with the little teeny bacteria type things in the mass oceans, and then there's a long period on the timeline where that's all there is, and then it starts showing you pictures of the little sea creatures and trilobites and then fishes and on and on and on. And then at the very end of the very long timeline is a little tiny strip where humans came to be. So for many, many children, this is just, for I think every child, it's like, whoa, like there's this huge sense of humility that comes with these kinds of lessons, right? Where you're like, there have been things around for a long time before even the first human came on the scene. So it's pretty inspiring for them to think about all of those things. So after, I want to talk just a little bit about this little boy who was choosing his work after having the Timeline of Life story, and he decided that he wanted to make his own timeline. So he wanted a really long piece of paper, and he was going to make his own timeline of life. So that's what he decided to do. So he worked on it for weeks, and he had all kinds of beautiful pictures he had drawn, and he wrote in some years, like this happened 65 million years ago, and this happened 20 million years ago, and he colored it in, and he was very, very, very happy with it. And some children go off and do dinosaurs, some write their own creation stories. I mean, it's all over the map what children choose to do after these lessons, but he made this beautiful timeline. And part of the tradition in our classroom was always to have a meeting one-on-one with each student each week to just kind of see how they were feeling about things. And I was having my meeting with Connor, and he said, I think my timeline is finished, and I'd really like to show it to you. And I was like, well, that's wonderful. Let's take a look at your timeline. So he told me all about it, and then he looked at me and he said, but I really think there's one more thing I need to add to my timeline. And I said, what would that be? And he said, at the very beginning of my timeline, I want to draw Adam and Eve. And I just my heart just so opened. I was like, oh, wow, this is a child who has really been able to take what he learned and integrate it into his own belief system, his own family's story of how they understand things, to have taken the creation stories that we did, and for him to be able to put the two together, and he did not see that as separate or as, you know, at odds with each other. To him, it was all one thing. And it still just gives me shivers, quite honestly, because, you know, it's when you see children make those connections, those realizations that everything's connected, that we don't have to believe one thing is a truth and another thing isn't, that we can really figure these things out for ourselves, and we can really have our own way of understanding things, and it can really incorporate many different narratives. It was a really wonderful moment for me, and I think for him too. And he said, and that's okay, isn't it? I was like, yeah, yeah, for sure. So I recently ran into Connor's mother, and Connor is now in his 4th year at the University of Guelph, and he's doing a biology degree. I'm like, oh, that's so perfect. So anyway, that was a wonderful thing to hear. So I guess I just wanted to end with that story and just say that I'm very grateful that I've had these two philosophies in my life, and I feel like I just don't know how anyone could be more lucky to have such a wonderful set of mentors and such an amazing practice to help me with my work and my life, because they are totally interconnected and so much a part of each other. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Carrie. As you may or may not have noticed, on one of our sub-themes for this weekend is one person's character inspires another. So what struck me is how Maria Montessori's character was such an inspiration for you, and how you then use that inspiration to carry it forward to inspire your students and yourself in the process. So thank you very much. So next I'd like to introduce Kitty.
Thank you. And have a bit of a wiggle while I go fetch my water bottle, please. Thank you, Mary. Have a stretch, whatever. And yawn. It's very good for re-oxygenating the brain when you've been sitting in class this long. Yeah, exactly. Boy, are we all on the same page or what? Really, listening to these two. I'm going to have trouble sitting down to do this. I hope you can hear me. Everybody can hear me okay? Sure. Well, yeah, I'll try it, but I'm a gesturer, so we'll give it a go. I have done some stand-up comedy in my time, so maybe I can make it work. Wow. Well, first of all, we have a completely new and different area of education with me, and that is the community college system. Now, it is almost 46 years since I started teaching, but today I want to tell you a little bit about how that dreadful thing happened, because in my life I was not interested in doing that whatsoever, and how I really found my own way in there by sheer happenstance. Of course, we know it's not now. And in fact, that I was one of Nichiren's children, in fact, one of Shakyamuni's own, for well into my early 60s, before I discovered this Buddhism. So, I mean, it was there in me all this time. And I heard other people say in the past 8 years since I've been practicing, when I discovered this Buddhism, it was like coming home. And that is exactly what I found. So this is a little bit before I found my way home, but you'll see I was on the path anyway. So I think one of the big discoveries of my life happened very early in childhood, and it can be summed up this way: we're all in the soup together. So that a good many things during my own growing up kind of jarred me and annoyed me when people were at odds with each other unnecessarily, or competing, or doing those things to make others miserable rather than to help them. Although, as Ghislaine has said, sometimes the misery between people can be such a growth experience too. And what you're experiencing, I'm going through with an old friend of over 40 years. We've fallen out in the past year and a half or so, and we are meeting next month to see if we can maybe solve and save the relationship. And if not, I believe we'll part amicably. But I mean, think of it, we brought each other through our whole adulthood. How can I let this end? So I'm going to be chanting for that and for you. Anyway, back to basics of confession first of all. I've already told you. The last thing on earth I ever wanted to be was a teacher. I thought, when I was little, there's no glamour in it, not like being a pirate or a ballerina.
There's nobody in a ballerina.
And in my teens, I was thinking things like a lab technician or a novelist or a poet, always doing something kind of solitary and elegant and brilliant and quiet, you know. So anyway, what I looked for when I graduated from Queen's with my trusty little master's degree in English language and literature, because I followed the path of least resistance through education, loved stories, loved language. This was just cool to do this. What I looked for was a job in commercial advertising in Toronto. That bombed, absolutely bombed. And I was in quite a lot of despair, but our Shoten Zenjin had everything in hand. Because there I was, grumpily going through the Globe and Mail one day, and there was a rather offbeat ad that said they wanted an untrained university graduate to teach part-time English in one of Ontario's brand new community colleges. They didn't want anybody with OISE, they didn't want anybody with teacherly predisposition in any one direction, because we were going to work this out together in the faculty in liberal arts at Humber College. So you know what I'm talking about. And that was an absolutely magnificent time to enter into the community college system, because it had been in existence for about 2 or 3 years. It's 1970 when I started. And there was so much idealism and so much wanting to enact humanism and bring it into the classroom and spread it among these kids in a post-secondary situation that they would never have dreamed of being in before, because it was university or trade and nothing in between. Well, we were going to create a new world for them. So we were just brimming with love and hope and all those good things. And there were a lot at that time. Of course, it was kind of the age of Aquarius. You may have heard of that. There was a lot of input from researchers even, and there was this dude from, I think, California called Roger Garrison, who had wonderful things to say about humanist education. I see that some of his beliefs have actually trickled into the system and are there fighting for their lives in a lot of situations now because of economics. But anyway, I answered this ad, and the result of it was 33 years of absolute horror and absolute delight and triumph of interacting with vocational students for the most part. Now, I did in those years teach a little bit of pre-university. Now they have a very strong university connection at my old college. That's happened since I left. I don't know if it's significant. But my favorites as time went on were the underprepared students, those who came in getting preparation in literacy and study skills and life skills so that they could then enter a community college program. And as you were saying about the kids with a bit of a problem, how fantastic it is to work with them and how enriching for us, they were my teachers' pets. So, however, that's not what I'm going to talk about today. And when asked to present something, one thing popped right to the top for me, and in a minute you'll hear quite a lot about it. First thing I have to say, of course, I've already indicated, is that my first year, remember, untrained, fresh little naive bopper, fishnet stockings, miniskirt, all that stuff, in very sexist situation in the colleges at that time. The first term was hell. I was 5 or 6 years older than my students, very academic. I stood up at a lectern and tried to present lectures to them, and one kid in a business English class stood up and he said, "Excuse me, Kitty," he said, "this is bullshit." And thank God I had the inner strength to say, "Yeah, you're right. We should be doing this together." together. And from then on, I was really committed to learning how to teach these people in this situation to bring out their strengths and develop my own so that I could do that. Well, my karma, of course, kicked in, and a mentor gave me a book, which actually changed my perception of life, and I was able to make use of it in all my literature courses pretty much from that time forward. And the book was one you may have heard of. It was published around 1964. It was a compilation of material edited and dominated by the thought of Carl Gustav Jung. Mr. Ikeda is a great fan of Jungian psychology and philosophy, and no wonder. Anyway, Jung was about 86 when he put this book together, so it really was a distillation of a lot of his wisdom through the years. And from that book, I reached in and plucked out a plum. I found a symbolic concept that to me explained so much about human life. And it became my purpose to sneak that into my literature courses. Now you've got to keep very much in mind that vocational students coming into the college system to learn what to do for their future career do not want to take stinking English. Not only do they not want to do it, it takes up their time, there's homework involved, and that kitty, she gives you so effing much of it, it's just it's terrible. However, they were obliged to. So my mission became to, because they were a captive audience, to seduce them in a sense. And for my own, to meet my own needs as an educator, the first thing I always did was learn all their names. So there'd be 35 to 40 vocational students sitting there like this, in this class. I'm going to skip it as much as I can. So I learned everybody's name, and we all learned each other's names. And I said, you've got to be like a 10-year-old just starting out here. So come on, loosen up, go back to being that kid you used to be. And we actually made a game of it, everybody naming everybody and getting applause and all that kind of stuff. But it did create a sense of community. Then I asked them if, said that, when I was a little kid, being a literary sort, I adored the classical myths of the Greeks and Romans. And did they, by any chance, know any myths? Well, around 1970, folks, there was a very popular rerunning cartoon on telly called The Mighty Hercules. Yes. So they would be telling me about how the old myth was portrayed, and Daedalus was this, and other, all kinds of characters. I said, okay, well, we're going to start there. Now, while I've got your 10-year-old with me, let's get the 10-year-old's ears open, because believe me, your 18-year-old ears will just want to shut down. I'm going to tell you a story. And I began to tell them an episode from the myth of Hercules. Hercules was a very complex character. He was very gifted athletically, not very smart intellectually, did things like shoot an arrow at the sun when he got too hot, that kind of thing. And he also caused mayhem, accidentally killing people all over the place. But in any case, I told them part of one of the great stories as it was written in the Greek myths, and then to find out what happened in the end, because, there they are, sitting there, a bunch of jaded, cynical, little teenage poops. They're absolutely wide-eyed. Those 10-year-olds did come out to listen. To finish the story, they had to go to the textbook, oh God, and read it. What they mostly did. And at the next class, what we did was I introduced this plum that I pulled out of the book called, sexist again, Man and His Symbols by C.G. Jung. What the plum was, let's see, do I want to tell you that now or in a minute? Yeah, it was a symbol of life experience that has many names, but the one that I like to use was the great cycle of human initiation. So what I did was just quickly outline that for them. And to outline it for you is very easy. You all know it in your bones all your life. And as Buddhists, you know it from every discussion meeting, every conversation, every interaction with another human being all your days. And it is this, very simply, it's, we put it into stories for the following reason. We put it into stories because we all know that this is the rhythm of life. When things are going well and you're feeling well, things are pretty cool. And no matter how mature we get, we have the wish and assumption that life continue like this. But as the new song by the group Dawes says in its refrain, things happen. That is all they ever do. So keep your ears perked on the rock stations. You will hear this coming out. It's true. That's all they ever do. And we discover time and again, that just when we get our toes into the cushy rug under our feet, along comes the devil king of the sixth heaven and yanks it out from under us. So then we have launched into the great cycle of human initiation. And it can be very helpful to know what the stages are. It includes grief, but grief is only one of a zillion components of it. But there are 5 main stages, so I'll just quickly run through those. First of all, there's the crisis itself. The devil king's yanking out of that rug. And secondly, your shock that, oh my God, this has happened. Things are not the way I thought they were going to be. People are not the way I want them to be. And I don't even know who I am anymore. So you're actually plunged into deep waters, unknown territory, use whatever metaphor you please, but everything is changing. Then comes the next stage in which you kind of have to pull away from your old life and your old sense of yourself and the way that you thought things were going to go and deal with it. That is followed by something that in the cycle is called isolation. You can be in a crowd of people, but if you're dealing with a crisis, you will still feel alone. Because within yourself, you have to face those demons, deal with those inner turmoils and all that stuff. And it's in the isolation phase that supporters are drawn to you. And gradually, you begin to find ways to heal and to see the world with new eyes, yourself as a new, evolving person. Once that process is underway, you're ready to return from this detour off the mainstream of your life. You're ready to return to the mainstream of your life, but you are different and you have more to offer. You have almost inevitably, through the suffering that you have experienced and the growth from it, you have discovered that your heart has somehow expanded. And you are much more, I hope, usually tolerant of other people, particularly those in some kind of pain themselves. So now students could recognize, they've lived it all their lives, they weren't conscious of it any more than most of us are. They could recognize this pattern, but they really didn't give a damn about it. Because the only story that the average teenager is interested in is his own. So we had to get to that. But first, together, we take a look at an episode from a classic myth, like Hercules' story, and trace together in class how the initiation cycle's components showed up in it. Now, Hercules' great crisis was pretty terrible. He was in many ways a comic figure, but not this time. In a fit of madness imposed by the gods, you know which one, he murdered his beloved wife Megara and their 2 little boys. And sanity returned to him and he was appalled at what he had done. His cousin Theseus came by, rushing to see if he could help, and there's Hercules' hands covered with blood. The first thing Theseus did was embrace him and hold his hands so that he shared the guilt. And then the great cycle of initiation began for Hercules. You've heard of his labors. They were the 12 tasks he had to perform to illustrate what we go through in order to recover from such a blow. So we worked on this together, and then an assignment followed in which the student had to work on his or her own. They could pick any person on the planet, living, dead, fictional, real, and simply do up a diagram and a written explanation showing which elements of the initiation cycle applied in that situation, and so forth. So they're testing their cognitive ability, their communication skills, and above all, their understanding. Now, if somebody just wrote me a narrative with all 5 steps in it, crap, I'm sorry, it's called, you go do that over by next week, or you're getting 0 on this. Because they had to show that they could literally intake and apply. Some people found, for example, that if they were dealing with a parent in agony because of lengthy unemployment, often due to injury, that this person with whom they had been so angry or so disgusted because all he does is sit around and zazz and drink beer, that kind of thing, was in isolation and had not yet begun the return. And that maybe a little bit of understanding toward this individual in their life would ease the whole family from the stress and strain that they were feeling. And even though it's a small start and a clumsy start, I think it's something that would carry on for that student and the other people that that student touches. I know that a lot of them probably didn't really know at the time that they had this new tool launched in their heart. But I found with them getting in touch with me later, Facebook is great for this, and even a couple turning up at school years after they graduated to tell me about things they had done successfully because of these concepts, that it lies dormant in their bones, but it's there, it's very much alive. It's one of those seeds, that metaphor that's used so often in our Buddhism, that can, under the right duress and the right circumstances, begin to sprout and grow those treasures of the heart of hope and courage. Oh, courage is so big in the initiation cycle. And of course, compassion, and last but not least, the thing for which we live, joy, no matter what. So that in the midst of crisis, shock, isolation, all those things, we can say, bring it on, I can do it. Now just let me have a look, cheat a little bit here to see if I had anything I absolutely wanted to say.
Make it short.
Well, okay, I promise. It's for Mr. Arcata, so it's real short. When students know that their teachers believe in them and would never abandon them, it can become a source of tremendous courage, enabling them to achieve immeasurable growth. And I think to the amazement of at least several hundred students over the years, learning that, hey, stories and books and movies and TV shows that have this element in them really, really show that we must never abandon each other, because we're all in the soup together.
I didn't mean to cut you short. I just wanted people to have a chance to ask you questions and thank you so much. And I'll think of Hercules in a whole new way today. So I'd like to ask, just open it up to anyone who has a few questions for the panel. I think Virginia had wanted to ask one earlier, and we have one. So Hope, you want to go first?
Kitty, after I have the book at home and the symbols, I mean, maybe you don't remember, but what section would I look in?
Well, check the index for initiation.
What will it say?
Probably initiation,
Okay, perfect.
right? And if we're exchanging emails, I can verify that for
Okay.
you. Okay, and the thing is, I'm not sure how much of, well, just take a look. You can let
Yeah.
me know what I'm
Yeah.
remembering. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Virginia, you have a question about it?
My question was just about Maria Montessori and Vincent Nakaguchi. Were they ever aware of each other? They kind of.
I really am not sure if they were or not. I've often fantasized about the dialogue President Nikita would have had with Maria Montessori had they been.
Nakaguchi.
Well, I was actually thinking Nikita had they lived at the same
Yeah.
time, but not that I know of.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's so many parallels, right? Makaguchi worked with, really
But he was
impoverished.
pedagogy around that time in the late
Yes, yeah.
1990s.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a connection, but that would be a really interesting thing to research.
And they were born within a year of each other. One in 1870, one in
Yeah,
1875.
we definitely lived in the same way.
How old were the students who went to the peace table?
That was in my early elementary class, so they were 6 to 9 years old. Yeah. And we did a lot of work with them, really learning to care for each other. You know, when there was someone who had a problem, it really was emphasized that, it's not okay for one person to be having a big problem and the rest of us to just carry on. It's all of our problems. Like, we all need to help that person. And the children really become very, very good at that. They want to have everyone happy. Yeah.
you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I just have a question for you, Giselle. Giselle, sorry, low names, excuse me. I apologize. Okay, I'm going to speak up. Okay, so I just wanted to, the thing that's really encouraged me recently is the SGI Akeda Wisdom Academy podcast for youth on how to get along with other people. They mentioned Maya Ono, who's the daughter of the trumpeter, the famous trumpeter, I can't think of his first name, who went through an awful lot and messaged and knows President Akeda quite well, had talked about her experience of getting along with a difficult person. And everybody in this room has had that kind of problem. So I mean, that might be, I have found a great deal of encouragement from what she has said about creating value, what you're doing, and in going through this difficulty. So just have a look at it. It's a really interesting, it's this year, and it's Maya Ono, and I'm not sure which month, but I can look it up and let you know.
It's on SGI
USA.
USA.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kristen, you wanna-
Yeah, I just wondered, Carrie, you had mentioned that there were 5 steps.
Yeah, the 5 great lessons.
So you said the coming of the universe, the timeline of life.
Yep. The next one is the coming of humans. So it takes that little section of the timeline of life and expands it out into a great big timeline of what early human ancestors looked like and how they evolved. It's a wonderful story about what makes us human. And you know, you look at people who they found had, you know, buried their dead, and that they had like art on them. You know, they would have had things with them that were creative that people did. So what makes us human? You know, where did all that start? What makes us different from any other animal? So it's a really wonderful story about just how humankind has developed. And then the next one is the story of numbers. So and all of these, of course, are to give the children context about why does it matter that I learn math, you know? Yeah. So the story of numbers is basically about like, you know, who probably started counting, and probably it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because we have 5 fingers. And then, you know, like there were just, and then trade, how did trade happen, and how did people have to keep track of how many things were traded and that sort of thing. So early abacuses and on and on and on. So the story of numbers is the 4th, and then the last one is the story of writing. So it explores just how language and communication, symbols, and writing came to be.
Cool,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I think if in the interest of time, and I'm sure you don't want to miss lunch, then we'll end here. And also, any other questions, I'm sure you can address to them individually. So I'd like to invite Wei up to say a few words to the panelists.
Thank you so much for the panel. I really enjoy it. They have so much notes here. Yeah, thank you. So I want to thank each one of you. Cass, somewhere. His name, Kerry and Kitty. Thank you so much for the wonderful experience and your insight about education and your experience that you brought up. It's really helpful for us to bring home. Okay, thank you so much.
Before we break, I just want to remind you, or maybe you're not aware of, is there's a film that's being shown continuously. Whereabouts is it, Glenn?
Right in the back of the...
In the back of the hall here. It goes together with the Caesarfolk exhibit. It's called A Quiet Revolution, and it will be running continuously throughout the weekend, so please take an opportunity to look at it. It's very inspiring. If you haven't signed up for the concurrent sessions, please don't forget to do so, again on the back of the door there. And then we're going to break now for lunch and return promptly at 1 to the beginning of the session. So enjoy.